Well, the judge in President Trump's January 6th case scheduling a Friday morning hearing on whether or not the former president can share evidence in the case publicly. Trump slammed the Justice Department yesterday in New Hampshire, accusing the special counsel of trying to violate his First Amendment rights. Watch.
Crooked Joe now wants the thug prosecutor, this deranged guy, to file a court order taking away my First Amendment rights so that I can't speak. That's not good for votes. Do you agree? When we say I can't talk, I will talk about it. I will. They're not taking away my First Amendment rights.
Joining me right now is former federal prosecutor and Fox News contributor Andrew McCarthy. Andrew, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Morning, Maria.
So what do you make of this? We all know President Trump is on Truth Social and on social media all the time and talking about whatever's going on. Is this an attack on his First Amendment right to not talk about this specific case?
Yeah, I don't really understand why they need to try to hamstring him from speaking about the case. You know, it would be one thing if the government itself were being discreet in its statements. But, you know, here's a case where President Trump is not charged with any crime arising out of the Capitol riot. And after the indictment is returned, Jack Smith, the prosecutor, does a 3-minute press conference where he makes one statement, and for 2.5 of the 3 minutes, he talks about the Capitol riot. So they're injecting really provocative stuff in their rhetoric into the case, on the one hand, trying to taint the jury pool, and on the other hand, they're trying to prevent him from being able to speak and limit what he's able to say about the things that actually are charged in the case. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
And of course, this is during a presidential election. So, you know, you're going to have a lot of other people talking about Trump. But if you're silencing Trump, that he can't defend himself in the public square, that does speak to what he's saying.
Yeah, I agree with that, Maria. I think that this would be a big problem even if the government was playing it straight, because you do have a situation here where the Justice Department of the Biden administration has decided to inject itself into electoral politics, even though that was, I think, catastrophic for the country in 2016 and 2020. They're going to go down this path yet again. And I just don't think if you're a judge and you're trying to be objective about it, it's not fair that they think that they, the government, can orchestrate press conferences and press statements and all this other stuff that they do so that they get their spin on the case, and then they don't allow Trump to respond. Remember, this Justice Department worked in tandem with the House Capitol Riot Committee, the January 6th committee, and they spun a version of events that really was completely one-sided. They didn't have any alternative perspective on that committee. So they've basically gotten their story out to a fare thee well to the country. And what Trump is saying, as I understand it, is he simply wants to be able to respond in kind.
Yeah. I wonder if, you know, they're seeing indictment after indictment that Trump sees his poll numbers go up, where Americans say, look, this is a distraction to the Biden crimes, and we're just going to vote for him again. Maybe you know, the DOJ is saying, well, it's because he's talking so much about it. Now let's just shut him down. I want to ask you about what you've been writing about, Andrew, because you wrote about Trump's documents case, and you write, I would take it as a hopeful sign that the judge seems concerned about the government's reliance on the Washington court in its Florida investigation. Tell us more about that, because this is something that Judge Cannon raised. Why is the grand jury in Washington dealing with a case that's originating in Florida?
Yeah, now, this is something that started, Maria, before Jack Smith was appointed, which is a whole nother thing. I mean, there was no need to have a special counsel in this case. The Biden Justice Department was investigating it for a year and a half. They appointed Smith just to create the illusion, or try to, that the Justice Department and the administration don't have anything to do with the decisions to prosecute Trump. I don't think anybody's particularly fooled by that. But they planted their flag in Washington, where they have a history of, you know, rulings from a court that's very friendly to them and has been hostile in the past to Trump. And the case that they brought down in Florida, every single thing of importance that happened in the case happened down in that jurisdiction, not in Washington. So you have this very peculiar situation where the grand jury that they are getting rulings from the court on is up in Washington, and the case is down in Florida. And it was one thing to start out that way, but now they've brought an indictment down in Florida. They actually, at the last second, had to represent a lot of what they did in Washington to a grand jury in Florida. But that means they have a grand jury in Florida. So what the judge is concerned about is, are they continuing to investigate in Washington? And if so, why are they doing that, since the case and the grand jury are down in Florida?
Yeah, and I think most people will say you're not going to get 12 jurors to convict. In Florida, you'll get more of a mixed showing versus you'll get the 12 jurors to convict in Washington against President Trump.
Yeah, I think the other thing is the most important ruling in this case was the one that was made by Judge Beryl Howell in Washington, saying that Trump basically didn't have an attorney-client privilege. She forced his attorney, Mark Corcoran, to give testimony that turns out, if you read the indictment, to be some of the most damaging testimony in the case.
Wow.
So that's a ruling that he got because they used a grand jury in Washington rather than using one down in Florida. But Judge Cannon will ultimately have to rule on that for purposes of whether that evidence comes into the trial or not.
Ah, interesting. Andrew, this Sunday I spoke with one of Trump's attorneys, Alina Habba. I also spoke with Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Both told me to expect an indictment coming out of Georgia. Here's Alina Habba with me on Sunday. Watch this.
Yes, I think that it's been highly spoken about. I think if you look at the barricades, the fact that she's got her PR team doing fresh pictures for her, it's a good indicator that Fannie wants her moment, and she will get on the bandwagon with the rest of the corrupt DAs and AGs that we've seen out of this country.
She's talking about Fani Willis, who is the prosecutor in Georgia. Do you expect that there will be an indictment coming from Georgia, the state of Georgia, in the coming 2 weeks?
Yeah, the way they've talked about it, the way that this prosecutor has talked about it for the last couple of years, you certainly knew one was coming. We know they had that final report a couple of months ago, and we know that she asked the court basically to clear its decks for the first 2 weeks in August. There's some security provisions that have been done down there. So clearly something's cooking. It's been coming for a long time. What I would just encourage people to remember, Maria, is that in the state system, these prosecutors are not, they're not appointed by someone because someone thinks that they're great for the rule of law. These are elected Democrats. They're progressive politicians who fill the office of the prosecutor in these different jurisdictions. Alvin Bragg is one. Letitia James is an elected Democrat who's she brought a case against Trump as the Attorney General of New York. These are people who sort of campaign on the fact that they're going to use their powers against someone who's their political nemesis.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's good politics in the places where they come from, even though I think it's terrible for law.
Yeah. Well, look, they campaigned on getting Trump is what they campaigned on. Andrew, what about the connection here in terms of what we're hearing about the Biden scandals? I spoke with Oversight Committee member Byron Donalds on Sunday, and he said there's a strategy here for the DOJ on all they're doing to Trump, and it has to do with covering up for Biden while costing money for Trump. Here's Byron Donalds from Florida. Watch.
First, the DOJ is corrupt in my view. They are obstructing justice, especially when you look at how they were handling all these dealings with Hunter Biden. But to a broader perspective, what the Department of Justice is really doing is they want to bleed Donald Trump dry.
Andrew, is that how you see it? They want to put so much on him that he's unable to campaign, unable to become the GOP nominee?
Well, I think their strategy, for the Democrats, from their point of view, is kind of a two-step. They think that the indictments improve Trump's standing with the Republican electorate, and they make it very hard for his primary opponents to get any traction because they're being asked about Trump all the time. They can't really make their own connections with the voters. But they also think that they can push these cases to trial. And so next year, when people are starting to think about voting, that's when all the stuff is going to come out in the hearings and the trials, and they think at that point it's not the Republican electorate, it's the general public.
I see.
And that will have a very different resonance than it has now. So
yeah.
That's what I think the Democrat position is. Get him nominated under these circumstances, and then kill him with all this evidence and other stuff as it gets down to the stretch run of the election.
Yeah, but Andrew, is it realistic to think that you're going to have a trial before the 2024 election? I mean, even in the classified documents case, for example, these are complicated documents that are going to have to be shared with the Trump team. They may have to go look at them confidentially in a SCIF. I mean, that takes time. You've got depositions that need to happen. Will this be able to come together for a trial before 2024 and the election?
Yeah, I think Maria, that it's much harder to get the Mar-a-Lago case to trial because that's controlled by the Classified Information Procedures Act, which means all the issues about admissibility of evidence have to be litigated before the trial. And that act actually has provisions for going up on appeal if there's disagreement about it. So there could be a lot of delay there. They've just filed a superseding indictment and added more counts and another defendant. That's going to delay it. So you think that the trial that I think he's going to try to push, especially since he's got a friendly forum, is the Washington trial, the election interference trial. The tactical mistake I think he made was filing the Florida case first, because he allows President Trump to go into Washington now and say, this prosecutor is undermining his right to a fair trial, because when is he supposed to prepare? The guy's indicted him in another district and pushed a judge into scheduling a trial for May.
Yeah.
So exactly when is Trump supposed to get to prepare for trial in what's a very complicated case in the election interference case?
Great point. Great analysis, as always. Andrew, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.
All right, Andrew McCarthy joining us this morning.